So I've just heard the news that President Trump decided to eliminate the Department of Education. I'm not surprised, unfortunately. I do believe Trump was quoted saying, "I do love the uneducated." Um, but yeah, it's sad, and it was kind of funny that he said that the last head of the Department of Education, hopefully, is going to be Linda McMahon, the wife of Vince McMahon, the WWE star. So it's kind of funny that the wife of a wrestling star is going to be the last leader of education. Education ended on her watch. It's kind of something funny about that. Reminds me of Idiocracy. The president, Terry Crews in Idiocracy, was a wrestling guy. But these are the times we live in. So yeah, it's unfortunate. He quoted some stats around and you got to be careful with statistics. My background is in finance, bachelor's and master's, and I've always been pretty good with statistics. And statistics is something that it's not a discipline that is intuitive to a lot of people, or to hardly anyone really. You can have correct statistics and tell whatever story you want to tell with them if you know how to manipulate the numbers, or how to say them in a way that maybe doesn't get the conclusion that one would expect, or the correct conclusion from the data. But anyway, Trump shared some statistics about, we spend the most by far per student on education, and we're not among the top when it comes to the performance. And I'm not surprised by this. The quality of the student goes a long way. And when I say the quality of the student, I'm not trying to make a case about, whether someone is intelligent or not genetically. I'm more talking about culturally. So, and not even the teachers either. And I'd like to share a little bit of my experience coming up through the education system as well. So what I mean by that, I'm not surprised. Let me just back up so I don't leave that point. I'm not surprised about us spending the most money and not being at the top of the performance for education. You can throw as much money around all you want. You can have fancy buildings and, a lot of teachers and even good teachers, but money is not going to teach you something, right? If I spend more money on a kid, does that mean he's going to know more? No. The variable that determines whether or not that kid is going to actually learn is time spent learning, right? Is opening up the textbook and actually reading it and paying attention in class, and not having behavioral issues, and actually doing the work. Throwing money at the issue is not necessarily, or not at all, going to make up for the difference. And I think that's why nations like China, who may spend far less per capita, because one, there's plenty of Chinese kids, but if you look at how the Chinese kids behave, if you look at how they spend their time, if you look at how competitive they are for education, partially because it is so competitive over there. Like, if you got over 1 billion people fighting for the same access to universities and good jobs, well, it's going to be pretty ruthless and pretty difficult to get those positions, and that increased competition is going to drive the culture towards having the average kid spending a lot of hours studying. And with us, we don't. It's not really that competitive. Our culture isn't such that everyone's studying a lot. It's the nerds who study a lot, and honestly, that's a disincentive, right? They get made fun of for being nerds and for spending so much time doing that. We celebrate people that play sports and play music and all kinds of stuff like that. But it's actually a disincentive here to study, where like over there, like that's the norm. And so if you have a kid who maybe doesn't have that much money allotted to him per capita, but he's actually spending the time to study, you can give a kid more money, and if he's not spending the time, there's nothing he can do to catch up. There's just no substitute for actually time spent. So I think that's why we spend so much and aren't at the top. However, reducing the spending isn't going to help. Like, it's not like we already have a cultural problem And then you start to remove the funding, and it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And I hope it gets better, but I don't, I don't see why it would. The argument is going to the states. Again, this is so recent in terms of the news. I'm not exactly sure where the accounting for that is going. He mentioned that some of it, like the special needs funds, some of that funding is going to stay and just move somewhere else. But I imagine a lot of it is going to be gone. And this is where my personal experience comes into play. So I went to public school in high school, K through 12, and I went to two different public schools. I went to the first, K through 8 was low income Black inner city schools, Columbus City schools in Ohio. And, when I went to school, being white meant you were in a minority, right? It was a majority people of color place. And we had resources, but it was not nearly at the level of where I went to high school, which is in Westerville, which is not even the whitest area. Even Westerville is fairly diverse, but it more closely matches the country where it's majority white, but you still have some, Black kids and Hispanics and, Africans and, from Asians and stuff from everywhere. But it was majority white. And the difference in the resources were huge. One of the ones that impacted me the most was they had programs that would offer more advanced classes to advanced kids earlier on. And what that allowed them to do is, start taking, without necessarily skipping a grade, they would take advanced classes like advanced high school classes in middle school, so that when they got to high school, they're ready to take, international baccalaureate and advanced placement courses much earlier. And when you're able to take those tougher courses, let's say you get an A in a advanced placement course, and someone else gets an A in a regular course. Well, getting A in advanced placement is more impressive. So how do you deal with that? Well, that's how students end up getting, over 4.0 GPAs, 4.2, 4.5, et cetera. It's because those advanced courses are weighted higher. And even though I was an advanced student coming up through Columbus City schools, they didn't have the infrastructure to allow me to kind of keep up with, the advanced students from Westerville. And so when I came to Westerville, they had already taken a lot of courses I didn't even have the opportunity to take. So I'm behind by definition, just due to lack of programs. But it's not just the programs. It's also the quality of the buildings. It's the fact that you don't have to share books as often. Every kid just gets their own book and tons of extracurricular. I mean, a huge amount of extracurriculars. Again, course variety. The difference in education, both public, was gigantic. And again, I'm not an expert on this. I didn't have time to research because I'm reacting to the news. But the thing that's supposed to help even the playing field is some of this federal stuff to say, hey, we understand property taxes funds a lot of schools. So if you live in a rich area, you're gonna have great schools, and if you live in a poor area, you're not going to have great schools. And just to break that down, in rich areas, you don't have a lot of density, right? You got people have big houses. And you may only have, a small number of kids per household with big households. So you have few kids, and these big households are worth a lot of money. So their property taxes are high. So you have few kids and higher property taxes. You have a good school. And then in poor areas, it's the opposite. You got a lot of kids in density and apartment complexes and projects, and those properties aren't worth much. So property taxes are low and the number of kids is high. And so there's just not that many resources there. And, anything funding that comes not from, not locally, that's what even gives the poor kids a chance to, and again, wasn't even great. Like I just told you how bad it was. The difference between, going to public school in a poor area and a wealthy area was for me. And that's with the Department of Education. That's with other sources besides property taxes. We start making everything local, and the poor kids, they're just going to fall behind. So, that was my experience, but it's looking to be worse going forward. So again, I don't claim to be an expert on this issue, but cutting education because we're bad at education, as if the money is the difference. It's a cultural issue. And now, how do you fix the cultural issue? That's the important question. That's the question of the day. And I don't have the answer for that. But, if we can get kids to actually want to study more. And one thing I want to say, the difference, I mentioned a lot of differences between the lower income schools and the higher income schools that I went to, in terms of, course diversity and extracurricular activities and, even lunch variety, books, technology, tons of differences. One thing that was not a difference was the quality of the teachers. Even in the poor areas, we had great teachers. I couldn't, there's always bad teachers and good teachers. There's a mix everywhere, but it wasn't like in the poor areas you had bad teachers, and then the wealthier areas you had better teachers. The teachers were roughly the same, but the amount of money that flowed through the system was vastly different. One thing I will say that was different was the culture of the students. In the poor areas, you tended to have more disciplinary issues. And that could have been because I went there at an earlier age, right? I went K through 8. So you probably see less disciplinary issues in high school than you would in the earlier grades. But still, I think there was a student cultural difference, also a difference in the level of engagement in the parents. Could be because poor kids, their parents have to work. But there is a cultural issue, and I think that is really the source of the difference between the United States and other nations. Is, just to be frank, their kids work a lot harder. They take education much more seriously. If you look at even in graduate graduate school, you'll see that most, not undergrad, but graduate, the vast majority of that is international. So that's just kind of how things work, where we don't really have that culture here of taking education as seriously as they take it in other places. And I think that's the variable that causes the differential in education outcomes, which is just how hard you're actually trying, how hard you're actually studying. Throwing money isn't going to fix the problem, but taking money away, especially when it hits the poor, and it just widens that gap, it's not good. And then anytime we move in the opposite direction of education, it's going to bother me a little bit. I just, I want to see, especially in a democracy, you can't be in a democracy and not have good education, right? Like if the people aren't making decisions, they don't need to know anything. But if they are, then we're in trouble. And they still do, right? Just for the sake of the economy, it's better to have an educated population. But yeah, sad news. Unsurprising. Hopefully we can get it back if Democrats win after Trump is gone and we start putting the pieces back together. But yeah, just wanted to share my thoughts.